Hi everyone and welcome to UI5ers Live. Our guest today is Mike Zaschka. Hi Mike.
Hi everyone.
Yeah, Mike wrote a blog post about a ChatGPT-like chat app he developed in UI5, and yeah, this attracted our attention. In particular, his view on certain aspects when planning bigger UI5 projects. That's why we got in contact with him and discussed this in more detail. And yeah, well, today he will tell this to you. And then in again, Stefan Beck.
Now unmute again. Hi. Sorry.
Peter Music.
Hi.
And Andreas Kunz.
Hello.
Yeah. And yeah, as the interest in TypeScript support in UI5 continues to grow, Andreas and Peter will give you also an update on this today. Yeah, but firstly, it's Mike's turn. So please, Mike, take over.
Yes, thanks for having me and thanks for the invitation. Yeah, as you mentioned, I actually wrote a blog post, and everyone is talking about and using ChatGPT these days. And I also wanted to kind of dig into the topic, and I used it for quite a while, and stumbled upon the API. So there's a technical API and I can build something with it. So I wanted to try this out. And in the same time, I actually stumbled across various blog posts or tutorials by other modern frameworks like Next.js and React and stuff like this, where they basically rebuild ChatGPT using those fancy frameworks. And I thought to myself, well, we also have very fancy frameworks in the SAP world. And why not rebuild this with SAP UI5 and the cloud application programming model? And so I did. And yeah, I thought to myself, well, let's blog about this and show the world. So the source code for this is publicly available at GitHub. So you can go check it out. It's hosted in our company account. So you can grab it, run it locally, deploy it to BTP, and do whatever you want with it. And I actually took the chance to actually talk about some of the concepts from ChatGPT, but also I wanted to dig into some of the implementation topics because I thought while building this, even if it's not a very complex application, I did not want to have this like a typical tutorial stuff where I just focus on ChatGPT, but put everything in a controller, for example. So I really wanted to apply some patterns that I think are very useful when you build applications to mitigate the risk of having technical debt because you have controllers with thousands of lines of code, etc. So I actually took the time and blogged about this. So it's a 3 blog post series. The first one is about ChatGPT. The second one is about the backend stuff. So I'm heavily using the cloud application programming model. I am heavily using TypeScript in that scenario. And the last one is about UI5, and that's basically the reason why I'm here. So yeah, I want to take the chance to just look at some of the aspects I wrote about. But first of all, maybe just quickly show you what I've built. And that's basically the chatbot. So when you look at this and you know ChatGPT, you would actually see that there are lots of things very similar. So, and I try to rebuild this, and the main difference is that it looks like Fiori, right? So it's because it's UI5, but it works basically the same, right? So I can create chats. Let's just create a chat, and let's give it a topic UI5ers live, and I can basically choose a model. Let's stay with GPT-3 because it's faster than the 4.1. I added a small thing called personality, so you can give the instructions to the chatbot to act like a pirate, for example, or development assistant. Let's grab this one, and I recently implemented the streaming, so you have this fancy typewriter effect when the bot is talking to you. Okay, so just do you know? Tell me something about UI5ers life. So, okay, so and basically talking to the to ChatGPT, and it's basically responding, and I'm streaming the response back to the to the application. And basically, it seems that ChatGPT is aware of UI5ers Live and what we're doing here, which is.
And he has a new naming suggestion for us, or he or she, because he called it Fibers Live. It calls it Fibers Live. So we should think about rebranding.
No, please not.
Okay. Yeah, my favorite one, just because I really like it very much, is that's actually I'm doing half of the time a day. Is let him tell me some pirate jokes, and they are really funny ones. Okay, that's not so funny, but okay, you get the idea. So basically, it's yeah, like ChatGPT but built with SAP technologies. And actually, again, I took some time and wanted to write about some stuff. I'm skipping the backend stuff because we want to focus on the front end. But let me just let's just jump into the front end stuff. So basically, when you, I don't know if you read through my blog post on the front end, but I actually wanted to point to, even if it's not that complex, the application, I want to right from the start apply some principles that I experienced over the years and I really like to value. Because 7 years ago, when I started with UI5, I did some mistakes that were really painful afterwards, and still today I see many people doing the same thing. Yeah, and I mean the UI5 community is pretty diverse, so we have really experienced JavaScript developers, TypeScript developers, but many people learn UI5 or JavaScript alongside UI5, and they tend to do the same mistakes that I did. Okay, I basically talked about two things, two primary things. The first one is TypeScript. And I heavily use TypeScript in the back end, and I heavily use TypeScript in the front end. And I mean, I don't want to spoil things because you guys are talking about TypeScript as well. I don't know. It's you should use it because it's super awesome. And I just want to showcase one thing that I really like in the combination with a cloud application programming as a backend. Where you have huge benefits in also doing TypeScript in the front end. So I think in the last episode, you actually had a guy who's responsible for the OData to TypeScript library and who actually wrote something that you can not only generate types based on OData services, but actually have a real library to access the OData endpoint, etc. And in my project, I'm actually not using this library, but similar one that can generate type definitions out of CDS files. So it's called CDS to types. It's not by me. It's been created by some other guy who did a very good job. And basically, what I want to show you is that I have this CDS data model, like I storing the chats and the messages in my backend, and I reuse these typings in the front end. So whenever let's just open a specific controller, and where have I used this here, for example. So in my chat controller, I actually bound the chat object to the view. And when I access this, I'm going to cast this into a chat. And this is pretty awesome because whenever I access the chat, I have the full properties of the chat available, right? And that's basically all the properties that I defined in the data model. So, which is pretty awesome because I have set this project up in a way that whenever I have this line over here, I can move this, okay. Let's just quickly go to the data model again and simply add another property to a chat. Like, let's just simply add a summary, which is a large string, for example. And I'm going to deploy this to the local database. And I'm going to restart the server. And when I go back to my controller, and I'm going to grab the chat object again, you can actually see that there's the summary field already available, right? So it's super convenient to have this kind of connected, and whenever I do a change in the back end, I have this available in the front end, and I can immediately see that I did a mistake at design time, etc., and not let the client, the customer figure this out. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to show you related to TypeScript. And again, I'm a huge fan of this, and I'm really excited what you guys have to announce regarding TypeScript support, because I already use it and I'm a big fan of this. Okay, but there are other things that I wanted to point out in that blog post, that sales blog post. And this is that you should write away, or actually when you're writing UI5 apps, you actually have already an architecture, right? So you have this MVC, model view controller. And when I started with this, I thought, okay, that's the architecture of things, right? So I have the view, I have the model, and when I do some coding, I do this in the controller, which led to the fact that I ended up with controllers having like, I don't know, multiple thousands lines of code. And then of course you can have a base controller, and I shared stuff in the base controller, but then the base controller got another staggering 2,000 lines of code. And then I had a real hard mess to maintain. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize is break out of this MVC right from the beginning, because from my point of view, the controller should only deal with stuff that is directly connected to the UI, right? So if you have events that need to be dealt with, then put them in the controller, but everything else like formatter functions, factory functions, data loading, data transformation stuff, put it in your own classes, in your own system. And there are some more advanced architectures already available. So Walter Lemaire, for example, he blogged last year, I think, about a reactive model thing, which is quite complex. And I'm not sure if this should be applied to every application, but you should nevertheless start right from the beginning to look at this. Okay, and I just wanted to show some small little tidbits that can help you to actually extract some code out into different classes. So one thing you will actually notice is that you don't see this typical formatter stuff that you actually see in most controllers, where just include import the static formatter file to have it available in your views. And there's a pretty much not so much known functionality in the views that enables you to actually require files directly inside of your views. So you don't have to just have this proxy object in your controller, but you can right away use this core require and load those formatters directly into your view. So you can then just reuse, where is it? Like it's like here, it's a standard like binding, property binding, and you can simply apply this formatter using this static function. So that's super convenient. And I also tend to have not only one formatter, but contextual formatters, like based on the entity or another pattern that I need to apply inside of my application. So not one formatter with 1,000 lines of code, but different formatters. And that makes it pretty easy to just grab the stuff that you need. That's also very helpful. For example, if you have stuff like in my view, I basically have this functionality. I need to manage this Zoom stuff. Okay, I cannot. How can I get rid of this? Okay, so I can, this layout thing where I have to expand certain areas of the UI, and that's something that potentially is not bound to my specific controller, but it's a general functionality that applies to the whole application. And instead of spoiling my base controller with this, I created an own layout manager for this, right? And you can use those integrated classes also as event handlers, right? So for example, here I have this press event and I'm calling it get instance because I can either call static functions, or in this case, I created a singleton. And I only need one layout manager in application, one instance, and I call a method on this. So that's also super convenient because I don't need to also define proxy functions in my controllers, but I can reuse this stuff in here. And again, these, I mean, I could talk for for hours about those event handlers because they are super powerful, right? So you can actually call stuff. You can have something like static values. You can also directly call the message using, I don't know, properties that you access from the binding. You can pass in the event handler, the event itself, or controllers and stuff like this. So they are really, really powerful, and they are helping me in mitigating the complexities stuff from applications. Okay, that's on the core require stuff. I also tend to have different classes for different purposes, right? And again, so I have service classes that deal with talking to the back end. I have a variety of utility classes that help me do certain things. And those can be, there's some patterns that can be used in your controllers that really helps you, extracting some code to other classes. So for example, when I want to delete a chat, that's also a common practice, right? So I want to delete something, I want to have a confirmation, otherwise I won't delete it. And that's stuff that you all have multiple times in your application. So I tend to have a helper that I can just call, like helper with confirmation. I can give in the title and some text, and then a callback function that will only be executed when I click the OK button. Otherwise, it will just be skipped, right? And that's not a huge code saving, but it's always like the functionality is generic and it's just reused in multiple places. And one other thing that I really like to do is handling dialogs, right? And in the beginning, I started to use those dialogs and load those dialogs and handle the events of the dialogs always inside of my controllers. In the same controller, basically, where I opened this, right? And if I had to use this in multiple places, of course, I would put it in the base controller. But that's not good, right? Because it will blow your controllers up. So a pattern that I use, and also I think Walter Lemaire talked about this last year, also in a more complex way, but to keep it like simplified, I'm opening a dialog right here whenever I click on this, right? And let's just look at the chats controller, how this looks. Okay, so basically that is the code that has been triggered, right? And again, I mean, in that project, no controller has more than like 80 lines of code because all the other stuff is extracted. So what I'm doing here is I have a class called new entity dialog, which is kind of generic. And I open this. And whenever I open this, I'm getting back a promise because whatever is done in the dialog, it may take some time, right? So the fragment has been loaded or needs to be loaded, and the user needs to fill in stuff. In my controller, I'm just interested in when this is done, does it succeed, or did the user cancel this, or did it fail, right? And that's what I'm listening here for, right? So I'm creating the dialog, open this, and then I wait until either the promise is solved, and I'm just taking this created object and calling the router to navigate to the chat, or when the user cancels this, I'm deleting this transient context, and then everything is working fine, right? And the pattern is pretty simple because what I'm doing here is whenever I open this, I'm returning this promise, and I keep the references to the resolve and reject functions and use them whenever I think I'm done or I need to cancel stuff, right? And that's some pretty simple pattern here, which makes it super convenient to extract some functionality into its own classes and wait if it's asynchronous, wait for stuff, and then come back and, well, you're fine. So yes, that's also something that I really, really value.
There's no question in the chat whether you cache the fragments. Do you use some kind of helper for that or not?
Okay, so in my case, I am in this simple case, I'm not caching this. So I don't know. no, I have no explicit functionality to cache this.
You assign it at least to the instance here, this the dialog.
Yeah, but I think I'm always creating a new instance. So I think it would be.
This dialog is connected now. It's to this new entity dialog. What happens? So it would not happen twice, or that you open that.
No, I will always create a new instance of the new.
There's no if dialog then continue. I mean, it's always doing this load.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this could potentially be optimized as well. But nevertheless, I just wanted to show the pattern on how this can be done. Okay, so maybe one last thing. I talked about the layout manager. Maybe you've spotted this in the view. Maybe we can have a short discussion on this because I'm interested in your opinion. I tend to have this layout manager, but I also kind of extended a certain model. So there's an app layout model, and I have a JSON model, which it's based on a JSON model. And because I'm using TypeScript, I like to have typings applied, right? So whenever I create a model instance and I want to access stuff from the controller, I can use this get property syntax on the pass stuff, but it's not really convenient to use this with TypeScript. So I tend to create a subclass of a JSON model and apply a certain interface and type definitions to this. And that's also something that can be used in the view, for example, to give me the model and I have a function on my model and I'm calling this right here. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in your topics because I stumbled upon a comment somewhere in the documentation that you should avoid doing such things, right?
Yeah, regarding this type JSON model, there was also recently some contribution to this ecosystem project where one showed how typing can be done. It's not yet submitted, it's still in the review phase and we're discussing that. But this would be also maybe something we can potentially then show in this round also in the future. And it goes also in the direction that you add on top of the JSON model, the typing, so that you have direct access to these properties via types or via proper APIs.
Basically, it does not create a subclass, but it uses generics and so on, and uses a certain type of typed JSON model, which is, I think, very cleverly using TypeScript constructs. And by sort of magic, you just define the structure, and then the entire model is typed with that. So I think what I saw so far from that looks very good. We will have a look whether we can integrate this more tightly into UI5, I would say, or at least we can share in a minute the link to this pull request.
I think it's still a draft, so we need to open that up. But anyhow, that's something maybe we can also prepare for one of the next UI5ers live, and then the colleague can also present that.
Okay, so yeah, I find this super interesting. Okay, so yeah, that's basically time stuff that I wanted to show you. There's probably some more stuff that I talked about in the blog post. So if you're interested in this, just read through this. And actually, I wrote this down below that I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. And if you have best practices, right? So that's not a fully fledged out architecture, but there are small tidbits that I think are really useful. And I'm eager to learn your tiny little helpers that help me structure my application.
I think two things we should really keep here as a takeaway, which is pretty interesting for everyone to know, is this core require part in the XML view. XML view, I always also forget that. And then when I see it live in demo again, it's saying, yeah, wow, that's so convenient to use and brings so much power in that. So that's really a nice thing. And also this, that's what you said with the eventing, that you can also pass the event, you can pass parameters and stuff like that. So this is really, this expression language is pretty mighty, how you can use that on an event handler to pass, let's say, also information to a function. So to make it even more generic. And then you can handle multiple events from different places then in a proper way like that. And then it can be also maybe centralized a bit better in these singletons or players like these layout managers or whatever. And that's really nice stuff. It's really cool to see.
Yes,
yeah,
thanks for
providing
this. No, I want to just say, I mean, you guys are providing this, so yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, and I also want just to say, like, I think it's great that you shared your thoughts also with this blog post, and it's really a call to action. Like, it's really exchanging know-how or experiences, what works for you in projects and not. This is super important, I think, especially also for people just starting with UI5. So yeah.
To give you a look behind the scenes, it was like someone from us saw this blog post, and then somebody mentioned, oh, he says model view controller is bad, and then we had a look, and then we saw what exactly is written there, that you should split up more functionality. Then we were like discussing, but that was not the idea in the beginning, that everything should go into the controller. Maybe our examples or so were not clear enough, and it went like back and forth like this. And so really this feedback makes us think and consider things and talk about it, and then it helps finally clarifying how apps should be built and how we actually thought it should be done. So we have, for example, small examples only, so there was no big need to separate out everything. Of course, some of the features like the new view eventing stuff was just not used because maybe the examples were older and so on. And so the impression exists that it should be done exactly like in our samples, but you got it exactly right, that there are more ways to do it, especially for bigger apps, than our typical samples are. So it's really good to get this feedback, and you see how it gets us thinking and getting in touch and so on.
Yeah, and really this last point where Andreas said this, it gets us thinking. So it's also that we from the framework development then also start thinking with that. What can we do better? What can we learn from that, and maybe even improve that what we have?
So if you have your own best practices and so, please share it with either with the blog post of Mike or with your own blog post. And yeah, really looking forward to see more best practices from you.
Yes. Okay. So just maybe last comment from my side. Actually, I'm taking this as a request, and basically I will have a talk at UI5Con this year to spoil things, where I will go down to the language level and try to find things that the otherwise really great documentation, where there's maybe some pieces that can be optimized, and how to bring UI5 really on a modern JavaScript level. So just a slightly spoiler advertisement from me here. Okay.
Already looking forward to that one.
Yes, thanks.
But now I think people are also waiting for the update of TypeScript now, because there was quite some discussion the last time. So we should take the last 12 to 15 minutes then on this.
Yeah, then I think I'll take over in the beginning. What I'm going to show though is news about TypeScript. So we have been working all the time on TypeScript topics to make it a better experience, to make it really, really stable and production ready. And there's been a lot of activity in this direction recently. And we just want to give you an update on what has been happening recently to get the final issues around UI5 and TypeScript solved. So you know this central entry page, sub.github.io, UI5 TypeScript, where we also have a link to the release notes. So where can I find news and release notes? And there's some talk about this, but basically there's the release notes page. And when you want to stay updated, when you're using UI5 and TypeScript, but want to stay updated about what is happening around the topic, then keep an eye on this page. This is where we basically publish all the important information, what we did in this area. So for example, what we are doing right now for the 1.15 release, which is in June, it's a couple of weeks away still, is another cleanup change that is incompatible. So previously you had sort of enums and static helpers on classes. You had imported them as named imports or as named exports. You import them in this named way. And we have cleaned this up to have them attached to the main object, to the default export. So it's no longer import action from the message box module, but it will be import the message box itself. And then you have message box.action and so on. And so this is for enums and static helpers. And also in dynamic imports, it works like import the default export and then access the enum, the static helper, and so on that. And the other thing is that now for the event parameters, we have improved how they are typed. So basically they were not typed at all. When you have an event, listen to it and say get parameter, you were on your own, totally not TypeScript-like. And now also with 1.15, you get really the list of event parameters when you start, even in the string here, when you have started a string, then you get the available ones. Or when you say get parameters, then you have all these sub properties with all the documentation and so on. So basically event handling now is also running much more smoothly than before. Sub-UI device was also a thing that was a bit strange to use. You had to import the browser from the device module. That now it's import the device and say device.browser like you would do it in JavaScript normally. Earlier news in April were, for example, that we have finally renamed the ES module version of the types, which should be the default version you use in the future. So we have sort of deprecated the types for the globals. You should not use them anymore. And now we are like paying tribute to this decision by really making the ES module version of the types, making them the types, nothing else. No TS types ESM, but it's going to be types. So we will maintain and release the TS types ESM version for a couple of months over the summer or so, but then we will stop publishing new versions for that. It's identical, it's just a name change. They have really clean name. And then, yeah, for example, there has been, so the testing topic, especially around OPA, has been a bit neglected because OPA doesn't fit the typed API very well. And we have worked a lot on this in the past by cleaning up the OPA APIs, the existing ones. And this has also resulted in now the publishing of a TypeScript branch in this UI5 TypeScript Hello World application. The sample, so when you go to say testing branch or TypeScript branch, I mean a testing branch anyway. So the testing branch now shows how you should write tests in TypeScript. So we have in the web app, we have that's interesting. So we have here unit tests and integration tests, so QUnit and OPA tests. They are quickly described in the README. So what are the files that make it up, that build the test structure? And for OPA, there's still a remark that we're still working on this. For QUnit, I would say what you see there is perfectly fine. For OPA, there are still some API issues that we are currently working at, and I think we can have a look at the code in VS Code. But at least here, everything is described. All the files are described that you need for the testing. And then once we have a look at VS Code, so for the OPA test, which is the more complex thing, QUnit, as I said, is pretty straightforward. It's just in TypeScript. For OPA tests, so you import, for example, the tests in the main OPA test entry point. So this is directly loaded from the HTML page. They import the different journeys. The journeys themselves look also pretty straightforward. Of course, you have the module imports now in TypeScript, but apart from that, it looks pretty normal. But you get now, of course, all the so the code completion stuff, so you can get all your assertions and actions in a typed way. So basically, this is also and has also been pretty straightforward. So here in the page definitions, where you define the actions and assertions, we have made this a class that is currently inheriting from OPA 5, but there might be something changing in the next 1-2 releases to make it even smoother. For example, if we want to get rid of this and here, and we also want to get rid of this casting, which we still have in the repository. So we are still working on the APIs, but in 1-2 releases, in 1.15 maybe, you should have a much smoother experience where you don't need this anymore and don't need this anymore. And then it looks like really the basic code you actually want to write when you write tests. And some of the improvements here have, for example, also taken care of making clear whether it's now for the success function, whether it's one or it's many elements that come in. That was always something I struggled with because the API says, well, it could be one element or it could be many elements, but actually this is clear. It depends on the previous parameters. And when we say now UI5 element, here, then it works and we have it typed. And when we say, oh, it could also be an array, then it complains, because in this, with this signature, it's always a single element, not an array. The public API to proof so far said, well, it could be an array or an element. This means in TypeScript, you always have to check what it is. And this is also something we have solved. So we have done a couple of improvements, and we will still do improvements like getting rid of this and this. And then by the 1.15 or 16 release, we should have a very clean OPA setup as well. So the testing should then be covered. To call the tests, now Peter, this is yours.
So what we did also with this testing branch here in this project is, and some of you have that set up already, is in order to make this transpiling possible for the TypeScript sources, we moved away from the babel configuration in the project. So everything is now integrated in the UI5 tooling with a tooling extension called UI5 task tooling transpile. And in that, we find a task and a middleware. And this can be used for simple babel transpilation of ES+, ES6+ to older JavaScript, or it can be used in our case also here for the TypeScript transpilation. So that at the end, everything what you do here in the package JSON is pretty straightforward, and most of the configuration really then goes into the UI5 YAML. And then the only thing what you need is to have the tooling transpile here as a dependency in, and maintain in the UI5 YAML file. Then on the one hand side, for the local development, the tooling transpile middleware, and for the build, the tooling transpile task. And also what you see here is that we went further ahead, that we made it configuration free. So there is no configuration by default necessary for this transpiling. All is derived from the project configuration, having the TS config with that. Or if you want, you can have a custom babel RC JSON in the project. Or even, I can also show that when we have a little bit more time on one of the next sessions then of the UI5ers Live, how you can also have a browsers list configuration to also specify to which target environment you want to build to. It's also documented in the NPM package homepage there. So, and with having that, for us, it was also interesting how we can go forward and make it possible to automate then the whole testing. Yeah, on the one hand side, you can for sure use the tooling to start the whole project locally. This is no magic. And then run the application and then also run the tests in the browser. But now it was also interesting how we get the testing done. And basically for the unit testing, we had always here in this case, the Karma testing set up. And this was also one of the basic recommendations we had here. And I went a bit ahead that, in the CI, we use a headless Chrome to also define a configuration to do the headless testing with coverage behind the scenes. And now if we execute that, what we have to do in the Karma is, you know that it's just a framework UI5. With that, it's all in already. And you can then run the testing here, Karma. I can just do it also without the coverage as a first thing. And now this is running the unit tests. And I see in this case also, if it's not the CI, the browser is running, it shows the tests. And it clicks through my application now. And at the end, I come back and tests are okay. So now, as I said, we want to also make it possible with the coverage. We implemented another plugin for Karma to simplify the whole execution of that. And for that, we have the Karma UI5 transpile plugin. This is also available on NPM, and this Hello World branch, it's explaining then also how this can be used. So you need to install a few dependencies. So it's also explaining that. And then most of the configuration from the plugin is also derived from the configuration from the UI5 project. And maybe the only thing what you need to know is that in case of you want to also handle your TypeScript files, that you inject then the UI5 transpile as a preprocessor for your files, for the web app files, or in case of libraries for the source files. And with that, then the UI5 transpile is taking care to do the instrumentation, and later on the coverage reporting happens. So what I can do now, I have done that locally. So I installed the Karma UI5 transpile together with the Karma coverage. And then in this, I configured the preprocessor and had the coverage configuration next to that. When I now run this Karma coverage, npm run Karma ci conf. Now Karma starts with this configuration, instruments the files using the UI5 tooling transpile. No configuration besides that is necessary. And the end result of that is that I get my coverage result. And you can then also find, in this case, if you have configured that, the HTML report. And now everything has also proper coverage results. You can see what has been walked through in the code execution, where are the missing links, where you need to look into. And more or less, that's what I wanted to briefly show today, and more to come about all that. But in a matter of time, I think that's enough for today, and stay tuned, more is coming. But take a look into this UI5 tooling transpile if you didn't do so. All the new project setups, what we do with the EasyUI5 generator, they are based on this UI5 tooling transpile. And with that, more or less, the thing gets much more simpler. And also what you have seen, the coverage is also a very simple step to add on your project.
Yeah, so Peter, if you want to say something for the last question we have in the chat, whether the transition from a Babel build step to a custom task, whether this transition was required. I already answered that the Babel step is still used internally, that it's just there to ease the setup, but both ways are valid. So
yeah, but what is beneficial with the UI5 tooling transpile in the case, for example, you also want to benefit from this coverage. Everything is now embedded. You don't need to worry on when the instrumentation takes place, how it's being configured. You benefit from, let's say, the way how UI5 detects all this configuration information, and then bring that together and use that for the transpilation or for the instrumentation steps. And this is, I would say, the more beneficial approach. You don't need to worry when to plug that in, how to copy that, how to copy or package things. Then finally, this all comes for free, and it takes care that it happens in the right place.
I hope this answers the question then. Yeah, over time again, I think this is really a tradition now. But I think we covered what we wanted to show today. Thanks for your participation. Thanks a lot, Mike, for your great presentation and the open discussion with us. That was really, really cool.
Yes, again, thanks for having me.
That was a nice one.
Yeah, and as Andreas and Peter said, like, I think we will have lots of follow-ups with TypeScript, as this is one of our major goals for this year. So stay tuned on this topic. And with this, I think we need to come to an end. Just wanted to say, next month we will have another UI5ers live, but it will be not on the second Thursday of the month, but on the third one, because there is a holiday in Germany, so we had to postpone it a bit. And yeah, there we will have Arno Buchholz with us. So some of you might know him already from some UI5 cons, so really looking forward to this. And then Alex from our team will be also there with an update on the UI integration cards. So I hope this is also interesting of you. I'm already looking forward to those topics. And with this, I would say, have a good evening, afternoon, day, wherever you are. See you in June, hopefully.
See you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.